Just a second. All right, so we're live on YouTube. Hey, folks, if you're watching right now, why are you spending your afternoon watching YouTube? Go outside. If you're watching it,
what's your problem? Hi, Jeff McKinney.
If you're watching, you normally watch it. Know that we recorded this on Sunday afternoon, so you don't need. If you start yelling at us in the comments, it's falling on deaf ears. So just be aware.
Yeah, if you're watching at our normal watching time, I'm sure there's like some election stuff going on and you're like yelling at us like, why aren't you mentioning what's happening in Florida? Sorry, we have no idea.
None.
You know what? Thinking about it, we should have done an election night podcast and just made sure we all had the day off the next day.
Oh God! Yeah, people argue that election day should be a holiday. I think the day after.
Yeah.
No, it should be a mental health day.
Yeah,
a nationwide mental health day.
Day of mourning. All right. Jeff, by chance, did you work on the intro or do I still need to do that?
Did I? Take a look.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right. If nobody has anything else, I'm ready to kick this show off. You guys good?
Yep.
I'm good.
All good.
All right.
Excuse me.
Got it cleared out?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Here we go. Oh, wait. I'm not recording audio yet.
How's my audio, by the way? Because I'm in
you sound a little far away.
A little far away, and that's the thing. I'm going like, and I was checking with my students because I got AirPods. The AirPod mic is just like awful. So I'm going from just like the computer mic, but I'll make sure to lean in like this, just because everyone needs to see this mustache for just a couple more days.
Can I start now?
I guess.
All right. All right. Here we go.
At the sound of the tone, the official "We Like Drinking" time will be 5 o'clock. Commence consumption.
This week on episode 302 of the We Like Drinking podcast, we'll be discussing Halloween time. Oops. Did I unmute? Damn it. Sorry about that, guys. I looked at the wrong thing and it had me all messed up.
Eccles, you were fine. Like you totally like you
overthought it.
Yeah, I did. I totally overthought it. My brain's functioning way too high level right now. All right. Sorry about that, Tony. I'm going to try that again.
Take two.
Cut.
Here we go.
At the sound of the tone, the official "We Like Drinking" time will be 5 o'clock. Commence consumption.
This week on episode 302 of the We Like Drinking podcast, we'll be discussing Halloween, time changes, and whiskey. Lots of whiskey with Tony Carroll of Knappogue Castle Irish Whiskey. So open that beer, uncork that wine, and let's get drinking! Oh, listeners, you are in for a treat this week as we are recording on a Sunday afternoon. We're recording Sunday, November 1st. Yes, crack that open, John. I'm guessing we're all going heavy alcohol to get through the day. Jeff Solomon, you what?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, those of you that watch at our regular time are probably like freaking out that like there's all this election stuff happening and we have no idea what's going on. Those of you that listen when this normally drops, I don't even know if we'll know who the president is at that point. But yeah, we just don't know. I think we're gonna have a better podcast not knowing as opposed to recording afterwards. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I think we're all going to need some time to decompress from the actual Tuesday night events. But before we do that, let me say cheers, my podcast drinking friends, and welcome to Happy Hour 302 of your favorite award-winning topical beer and wine education podcast focusing on fun.
Fun.
We like to have it. We like to have it often. So make sure you never miss another episode of our brand of drinking fun by visiting welikeDrinking.com/subscribe. All right, we got to get this day drinking galore. So let's find out who we're drinking with and what they've got. We've got our usual panel members. We have our California Sustainable Wine Growing Ambassador and recovering wine blogger, Jeff Solomon.
Hey, still mustachioed for a day or two.
We have our commercial brewer and snake wrangler, John Ruyak.
Yeah, I made it out of bed in time for the show.
And I am your host and certified specialist of wine, Jeff Eccles. Now, our guest this week is the global brand ambassador for Knappogue Castle Irish whiskey. Based in Ireland, he spends his time traveling the world to train and educate people on Knappogue Castle. Please help us welcome Tony Carroll. Welcome to the show, Tony.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. Absolutely love the rock vibe coming in there.
Yeah, man, it gets us going. You'd think after 300 episodes or more, we would be tired of that intro, but we don't get tired of it. It gets us going every single time. It gets us ready to drink. So hopefully that did the same thing for you.
Absolutely. It's 7 p.m. in Ireland right now. So I think my wife said to me, I think you're planning these podcasts deliberately.
We aim to please.
And she may very well be right.
We aim to please. Now, listeners, you can find Knappogue Castle products on their website at knappoguewhiskey.com, on Instagram and Facebook at Knappogue Whiskey, and on Twitter at Knap Whiskey. We should say, in case you're driving down the road trying to find that you should spell it Knappogue. And it just rolls
off the tongue. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's find out what everybody's got in their glass. I'm going to start west and work our way east. So Jeff Solomon.
Yes, sir. Hey, if we want to talk about West Coast, and if we want to talk about, one of my favorite bigger independent micro breweries. I mean, are they still independent? I'm actually going with the Firestone Walker Luponic Distortion. Just one of my favorite, lighter, crisper, juicier, West Coastian IPAs. I just can't get enough of these. These are always just kind of like my go-to, and they bring a lot of flavor to all of what we'll call the Central Coast of California. Big fan.
Excellent. John Ruyak.
Yeah, Firestone Walker, a flagship for quality throughout the brewing industry. We actually model our dedication to quality on Firestone Walker's SOPs or standard operating procedures and things like that. So yeah, it's just a fine brewery. So we're going to go back a ways a little bit. We did that Oscar Blues special.
Yep.
Right. And you got the 15 pack and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. But my son got married in Colorado like a week after that show, right?
Yep.
And we had a little bit of an after party at our Airbnb, and my brother picked up that 15 pack and he sent it along with me. So I've got a couple left. So I'm starting with the One Eye IPA, which is actually a hazy 100 calorie. And then I'm going to back that up with the bomb Goodnight Imperial Red India Pale Ale. So
no better day drinking beer than the one that's
Imperial Red, right?
Enjoy your nap during the afternoon football games today.
Yes, exactly.
It's cool that you start off with the low ABV and then you just drive it home with the big dog.
Well, of course.
Tony, I'm going to be jealous of this one, but what are you drinking this evening?
Okay, so we're 1st of November, and we're heading into deep and heavy winter very, very soon. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to drink the Knappogue Castle 16-year-old single malt, which is a 14 years aged in grade 1 bourbon cask. We swap it all out, and we finish it for the final 2 years of its life in high-end sherry oloroso cask. So a beautiful, mature whiskey, but then huge influence of the sherry oloroso. So a great smoothness, but also huge warmth, which is an ideal winter drink.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like hunching my shoulders after I said what I was going to drinking, and then you brought that out, Tony. Thanks.
Well, that's why I get paid the big bucks, John.
I'm going it back into the annals a little bit as well. We had an Oktoberfest episode a little bit ago, and I still have a Paulaner left. And
I still have 2 of those, yeah. But
I'm gonna pour one of those. That's a good day drinking beer, right?
Yeah.
Sure, nice and malty.
Absolutely.
Nap it, like as Solomon said, nap inducing.
That's a good brunch beer, dude.
All right, we do have Brad said hey to Tony, so Brad is watching. So thank you, Brad, for spending your Sunday with us. We appreciate that.
Brad's everywhere, even on test episodes.
Quality dude.
Yeah, Brad is the man. All right, so we got the drinks out of the way. We know what we're doing. It's time to warm up the brain cells a little bit with a bit we like to call
wine, beer, spirit, or pop culture reference. This is where I'm going to give our panel a term, and they have to figure out, is this a wine term, a beer term, a spirit term, or some sort of pop culture reference? This week's term is Corsair. Is Corsair a wine, beer, spirit, or pop culture reference? John Ruyak.
I'm going to go deep on this, okay? So if you've been following the tavern, you know that I was going to brew the strong Scotch ale on Friday, but I had some questions about it. And I talked to Dan, the owner of the brewery, and he's one who developed all the recipes. And I got some insight on how to brew this most successfully. And I went about changing my mind to brew that strong Scotch ale yesterday, October 31st, Saturday. And took a shower, got dressed, walked out. CNN popped up on my wife's phone as I'm going out to the kitchen, and I saw the bad news that Sir Sean Connery had passed away. And people of my age, I mean, that's a dude who's been in the movies since the day I was born. And just a really hard day, but I brewed that strong Scotch ale yesterday, and it's going to go out on the board as 007 when it gets ready for serving. Corsair is a kind of car. This is a pop culture reference in reference to maybe a car that James Bond drove in some of the early 60s movies.
Interesting. I like that roundaboutism that just seems to make sense. So John Ruyak is calling this a pop culture reference. Let's talk to Tony. What do you think about the term Corsair? Is this a wine term, beer, spirit, or pop culture reference? What are you thinking?
I was hoping I have enough time to Google the answer.
That's why we're catching you off guard here.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Jeff. But albeit the way you pronounce it, which is Corsair, John mentioned that he felt there was a little bit of maybe a Scotch reference to it within the spirits industry. And he mentioned the great and the past Sean Connery. I would also say I feel Corsair is actually quite Gaelic. And if it's Gaelic, it could be a small bit Scotch or very much Irish, where we always like to believe real alcohol and whiskey began. So Corsair would be something that can be quite Irish, Scotch, but also a bit French. So I'm a small bit on the fence, but I'm actually just going to go with spirit, simply because it sounds quite Gaelic, depending on its pronunciation.
Ah, interesting. And we do have to say, you know, us Americans do a pretty bad job of pronouncing things in general. But okay, so Tony is saying that this is a spirit reference. Jeff Eccles, what are you thinking about this?
Man, I got stolen by everybody here. Like, I was like, all right, this has got to be a Sean Connery reference, so I'm going to go with that. John came in and took it. So then I was like, uh-oh, I have to pivot. So I was like, oh, this is going to be some kind of spirit term related to Ireland or Scotland or something to all kind of tie it in together. And then Tony grabbed that. So I think I'm also going to say that this is a spirit term, and it's got something to do. It's like the name of a wind or something like that helps the crops grow the grains for Irish whiskey or something like that. It's some really esoteric term that you went with this week.
Wow. You know what's the most surprising thing? It's not that I've got two people saying spirit. It's not that I've got a panel member thinking it's a pop culture reference going back to Sean Connery. It's not that Brad H., who's watching us live, as you shan't do on a Sunday morning. This is crazy, man. What are you doing? Not really surprised that Brad is also saying maybe it's some sort of car situation. What's surprising to me is that nobody asked me how to spell it, and I don't know if that would have changed any of your answers, but just for those that maybe did want to Google this later, Corsair, Corsair,
which is why I didn't ask you to spell it.
Yeah, Corsair is an American distillery that's known for making a whiskey with quinoa as the primary fermentable. They're in the state of Kentucky. This particular whiskey has notes of cinnamon and apple on the nose, and on the palate, it's got an earthy and nutty flavor. It is a spirit term. Congratulations, Eccles and Tony.
By default.
John Ruyak and Brad, better luck next time. Corsair!
You know, sometimes you just got to get the hit. So you just got to get in the field of play and call that a win. So Tony and I will take it for sure. All right, let's get through this. We've wasted 15 minutes of Tony's life getting to the point where we actually do the interview of him. So let's get to that. So Tony, you know, with our interviews, I always want to take the first question just in case our listeners don't know. And especially when we're talking about things like Irish whiskey, there's always a story. It's Ireland, it's Irish people. There's probably always 8 stories that tell us how Knappogue was born, how it came to be. So Tony, tell us the tale of Knappogue Castle Irish whiskey.
Okay, so apologies, my link seems to be breaking up a touch, Jeff, but I'll keep rolling because I've got a gist of what you were saying. The history of Knappogue Castle, we're quite lucky in the sense that an awful lot of brands right now, some have fabulous heritage, some have fabulous budgets to promote that heritage. Other distilleries have fabulous budgets to create a heritage. We're very, very lucky in the sense that Knappogue Castle Irish whiskey dates back to the 1400s, where a very, very famous High King of Munster by the name of Sean McNamara, he led the McNamara clan in the west of Ireland He had over 42 castles that was part of the McNamara clan, and the number one and the HQ of those 42 castles was a castle called Knappogue Castle in County Clare in Ireland. So in the 1400s, very much for well over maybe a century and a half, that castle was very much the HQ of the west of Ireland. It was the HQ of anybody coming from Dublin and Cork or down from Belfast. That was Sean McNamara was the man to meet. Unfortunately, over many years of war, predominantly imposed by the British, our fabulous friends and neighbours now, but at the time they weren't particularly neighbourly. The castle fell into massive disrepute and disrepair, and actually ended up as farmland and as a farmhouse for cattle. Thankfully, Interstage left a very, very wealthy Texan company or couple, called Mark Edwin Andrews and his wife Navone. So they came to Ireland. They wanted to purchase a property. They wanted to do it up, bring it back to its former glory, and they had purchased Knappogue Castle. So they spent huge amounts of money in Knappogue Castle. They brought it back to its former glory. And during this time, which is about the 1960s now, Mark was also an avid whiskey purchaser. So started buying casks of whiskey, and his first commercial whiskey that he put to market and that he released was the Knappogue Castle 1951, which was actually bottled in 1987, making it a 36-year-old whiskey. And really from that time, once he released the Knappogue Castle 1951 in 1987, we've been releasing Knappogue Castle expressions ever since. So in current terms and right now, we have a 12-year-old single malt Irish whiskey. We go from 12, a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old. We've got 21-year-old. And probably the most exciting thing to come to our portfolio has been the Knappogue Castle finishes, which I've got some of them right behind me here, where we age our whiskey, our 12-year-old, for 12 years of age in grade 1 bourbon barrels, but then we swap out the whiskey 100% and we finish them for 12 months to 15 months in Pichon Baron, maybe some Marsala casks, some Barolo casks, high-end premium wine cask finishes. And we believe it's a fabulous journey to go on. It's a great journey for the new consumer. The new consumer, there is no whiskey consumers anymore, or just beer consumers, or just wine consumers. We all mix and match. And that's very, very important. And I think going forward, we all have to have an open mind towards that aspect. And we love the idea that now a Knappogue Castle Pichon drinker could sample that whiskey and say, God, I really appreciate the Pichon finish. And the next time they're in a restaurant, they're going to ask for a bottle of Pichon Baron because they want to join up their thinking process. And of course, that's great for the distributors, great for the off licenses and for your liquor stores, because now we're joining up whiskey drinkers, wine drinkers, etc., etc. And we can see now as well where some of the whiskey finishers are, they're in coffee finishes, they're in beer finishes and casks. So the drinking space is becoming a lot more confined and a lot more joined up approach. So that's some of the history at the moment for Knappogue Castle.
That's amazing. And that, that's where this show came from as well, is that, we all like to drink all the things. But those are just incredible things that you're doing with those blends, especially like with the Barolo and the sherry casks, and the flavor profile of those has got to be just lights out crazy. Like, do you have of those finishing ones, do you have one that you're really like a favorite, or one that you're like, oh, people need to try this one?
Yeah, for me, and again, this is very, very personal. This is just my opinion. Even when we're all if we're sampling our beer, if we're sampling our whiskey or our wines today, I always say, remember, for me, it's 7 o'clock. I just had a Chinese for dinner. So my taste profile now will probably react differently to what I'm about to sample and drink. And you guys, it's early morning breakfast time, so or lunchtime, so and vice versa. But for me, the Pichon Baron is the one that always is my personal favorite. I actually sampled and tasted the Pichon Baron cask finish in the Harvard Club in New York City, and we had some well-heeled folk at that tasting, and little did I know that a number of the people that were tasting the whiskey that night had actually been to the Pichon Baron vineyard down in southern France, and were actually asking me questions like, which warehouse did the barrel come from?
Wine people.
Which just absolutely. And of course, when you dive into the history of Pichon Baron was actually the father figure of Pichon Baron. He had a daughter, he had a son. He left the majority of the vineyard and all the wine business to the son and the daughter. And so hence there's a sort of a female-male sides to the business. And I asked a question on the night, where does everybody think? Was it male or female where this Pichon cask came from? I think the majority, in fairness, said female, and they were 100% right because it has a beautiful sensitivity to the cask, to the flavor, smoothness within the Knappogue Castle 12-year-old, but then the added smoothness and sophistication of the Pichon Baron. So yeah, their stories, their finishes that are just a pleasure to bring to the consumer.
I want some of that so bad.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So do I. So
John.
I just wanted to ask the question and to clarify for maybe some people that don't know. So, and I'm going to clarify for myself in that you aren't distilling the whiskey yourselves. However, you are aging it to your specifications on site in the barrels of your choosing. Is that correct?
That's correct, John. So for 12 years, we age our Knappogue Castle single malt Irish whiskey in grade 1 bourbon barrel. So we age that in County Cork in our Middleton distillery. The Irish climate is ideal, we believe, for aging whiskey, simply because we have very little fluctuations in our climate in Ireland. We are 100%, and apologies to your customers and your viewers when I say this, but we've got 100% shite weather.
So you're not worried a lot about losing a lot to the Angel share because it's not, you don't have big temperature fluctuations, so you're not getting a lot of evaporative loss in the casks and things. So
correct.
You're having
correct.
You're having a lot of the whiskey has a lot of contact with the wood without having to top it off with new liquid or anything like that.
Yeah, we would be very lucky. I suppose ourselves and the Scotch, in fairness to them, we would have no temperature controlled warehouses simply because that there isn't much fluctuation with the weather. But I will say about 2 years ago, we had an extremely hot Irish summer. And in about 10 to 15 years, we're really looking forward to seeing what the expressions are going to be like when those times come for bottling that whiskey, because there's going to be a fluctuation, unbelievably hot for about 3 to 4 months. So and that's the joy, that's the beauty of making your spirits, your wine, because there's a maturation to it. But just to go back to your question, so we age Knappogue Castle for 12 years, then we ship over to Ireland the Pichon Baron barrels, and then we put 100% 12-year-old single malt Irish whiskey into the Pichon cask, and we let it sit for 12 to 15 months. Why I say 12 to 15 months, that is, of course, a nod and a nod of respect to the master blender and taster and distiller. He decides when is the perfect tipping point to bottle that. It could be 12 months in one cask. It could be 15 months in another. So.
I'm in awe of those people that do that and can just sense the.
Yeah.
I know the tipping point in a keg of beer, but our turnaround time is a month. So the best beer is always about halfway through that run, and it'll be gone in 2 weeks. But to be patient and just like sip it and take that little thief and just taste it over the course of months is just that's just, I have a lot of respect for that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I've got a question that I want to keep till the end, because I know you guys you're good beer drinkers. I worked for a small little beer company called Heineken for about 7 years. So I've got a small little question at the end of this that I want to ask you guys, because it's quite interesting. But just to mention, Heineken have got a production, a batch of Heineken. It's about 22 days when I worked for them. Knappogue Castle, we've got about 32 to 36 days to produce a batch of Irish whiskey. But imagine then we've got to go to bed, we've got to mature for about, a minimum of 3 to 4. But in super premium like Knappogue, we're going to bed for somewhere in the region of about 12 to 15, 16 years. So while your beers, after your 22 days, you're ready to rock and roll.
Wow. Tony, I love hearing just the passion that you have behind this product, and just hearing the way that you're talking about just the playing around with different finishing barrels is just, it's so neat to me. I would imagine in your capacity as a global ambassador, that oftentimes you might find yourself kind of pushing back against folks that might think more about Irish whiskey as just being this monolith of just like, this generic blend, it is what it is. Do you feel like a big maybe purpose behind Pogue is to break that mold of what people think about Irish whiskey?
Yeah. Thank you for the compliment, Jeff. I appreciate it. Regard's been so passionate. I think Irish people are predominantly and naturally passionate about things that we unbelievably love. I'm very passionate about Knappogue Castle, but I would take it a step further to all the other Irish whiskey ambassadors and international people. We're very proud of our heritage that has gone into Irish whiskey. Irish whiskey has been there back in the famine. It has been there in World War I, World War II. We didn't come out of the World Wars as well as Scotch, simply because the whiskey forefathers believed that we will stay true to our bourbon casks, which weren't as readily available because of World War. But so they had their beliefs, and we all owe our appreciation to the longevity of this business. Maybe no different than anyone else, but certainly in Irish whiskey and now bourbon, Scotch, you must have a massive appreciation to what's gone before you, because you're in a business of maturation. You're in a business of long term. So it's not like your beers, like I said, they're produced in 22 days. The batch is gone in a month, but there's still heritage there in your beers, in your craft beers, in your large multinationals. So for me, yeah, unbelievably passionate. I guess then there's another level to Knappogue where we're not, we don't have huge above the line advertising campaigns. And with that becomes a struggle and a challenge to get in front of the consumer. And honestly, as bad as COVID has been worldwide for everybody, we've all suffered individually one way or another with COVID. It's actually been, I think, probably a positive towards super premium brands like Knappogue, because the consumer has actually time to go online, educate themselves, take time to see, well, what else is in this space? I won't depend on what I saw on a billboard yesterday or what I saw on an advert. I'm now actually going to do a little bit of my own research. And I think the Knappogue brand and brands like Knappogue, either be Scotch, bourbon, or Irish, have all benefited from that. But yeah, look, I take my job unbelievably seriously. But when I say unbelievably serious, I always have to remember I'm Irish, so I can never really be serious. Christmas.
Yeah, and you touched on a good point there with the whole COVID thing. I think another part of it, I think when COVID first struck and we all went to lockdown, everybody grabbed all the booze because they're like, I'm going to need a lot of this. And I think as time has gone on, I think people are spending more time with their drinks. It may not be about tying one on. It's more about, you know what? I just need to wind down and kind of forget the day and just lose myself in something. And I think that's where you see that premium stuff really starting to come to the forefront, even more than it was before, is that people are gravitating towards things that they can appreciate the craft that went into it. So for our American listeners, what's the distribution like in the United States for Knappogue? And can we get your entire line, or is it a subset of your line that we can get in the US?
Okay, so the easiest point of access to Knappogue in America, in the US market, is VinePair and online sales. You can get the core range, which is your 12, 14, and 16-year-olds. And that core range, sometimes we flip over core very quickly, as if to say it's just entry level. We're talking about super premium 12-year-old single malt Irish whiskey, triple distilled in grade 1 bourbon barrel. But we've got a 12-year-old, we've got a 14-year-old, which is aged for 14 years in bourbon barrels and then 14 years in sherry oloroso, but it's an 80-20 split. So 80% of the bottle is bourbon barrel, 20% sherry oloroso, but it's got a 46% ABV. So it's the strength of the alcohol is going to question the influence of the sherry oloroso coming in. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, 16-year-old, which is 14-year-old Irish whiskey, aged for a final 2 years into sherry oloroso. So this should have a huge bang of sherry oloroso with a 43%. But the finishes then, which are on limited release in America and in the US, I think we've got the Barolo there right now, which is a fabulous, and the Pichon. So we bring out in about 2 releases at a time, just to give the consumer an opportunity to taste, sample, and to come back and try something else. So pretty much every 6 to 8 months, we should have a new release in the States. So plenty time for the consumer to go through the gears and enjoy.
There you go. John, any other questions?
Yeah, we've one of the issues that I have with whiskeys, and it has nothing to do with the quality, but we've had a number of product representatives. We've had some distillers on the show, and it just I get down to that where there's a quarter of a bottle left, and it's like all of a sudden they say, well, you got to finish it, because you're starting to lose the aromatics. Is that something that you see in that product as well, where I have to have, and I can't have 6 guys over to sit around the backyard and sip whiskey, but is it the same kind of thing with your products, where you see where the aromatics start to lose their potency when the bottles say less than a third full?
That is, for me personally, John, an unbelievably hot topic, and I've got a couple of different angles to this, and I'll tell you what they are. I recently realized, and as you can see behind me, I've got a lot of whiskey available to me, and all high end. And actually, last week I did a podcast, and I actually warmed up for the podcast drinking a young 3 to 4 year old Clontarf, which is another brand of ours. I warmed up drinking a 3 to 4 year old single malt Clontarf, and I'd done it deliberately so I would appreciate the 12, the 14, the 16, the Pogue when I came to the tasting. And it worked a treat. It really proved my point that, sometimes if you continually drink high-end, super premium brands, eventually your palate will tire. So
there's a lot going on. There's
correct.
A lot going on in those.
Yeah. And there's a reason why the guys that drive Ferraris every now and then, swap it out and buy a motorbike, because they need a little difference in their life. albeit the Ferrari is phenomenal. So I realized during the week as well that I'm missing two things when I'm drinking really, really good liquid and good whiskey. And I mean liquid and whiskey when I mean you could be drinking a bourbon, a scotch, an Irish. You could be drinking a high-end wine or a beer, you name it. I've realized recently I miss the interaction of people. I miss being in Shanghai drinking in a Pogue Castle and saying, wow, I'm appreciating a single malt Irish whiskey in Shanghai in China. Or when I come for the week into New York for St. Patrick's Week and I do the Pogue tastings and I say, wow, I enjoyed a 16-year-old downtown Manhattan. And I'm saying that's an absolute honor. More and more now I'm drinking in my study at the moment. And I feel I'm missing the integration of people. I'm missing the connection. So I feel a little bit like it's time to get people back, because people are everything when it comes to our whiskeys, our wines, and our beers, because we get to discuss, we get to sample. Somebody might ask me, excuse me, you look like you know what you're drinking. What are you drinking? And I might say it's in a Pogue or it's a nice wine. And then somebody would say, do you know what? I'll have a glass of that. And that creates a connection, because that's what drink was created for. It's created to enjoy, but to create that connection. So for me, the people and the connections and the whiskey are everything, you know?
So I just wanted to add on to that and relay a little bit of the experience that we're having. I work at a very small brewery. We do 400 barrels a year. We have 2 locations, and we're at 25% capacity indoor seating. So thank the good Lord that our regular customers have been keeping us afloat with that limited 25% seating. It just pays the bills, and that's about it. But it's just limited to the same, and thank you very much to them. But it's almost just like family, and now we're just having the same conversations over and over again, and we want to. You want to go out and you want to intermingle with the people that are experiencing your product for the first time. And we have very little of that. I mean, we had to break up a husband and wife team last night. I mean, a husband and wife that come in 3 times a week and they're arguing about the election. I mean, so it's just like it's like the living room at home is just kind of ended up at Lizard Tail Brewing. And we're missing, Tony, as you said, that social interaction, and now it's just so limited that it just seems like we're just bumping up against the same old people that are safe in our bubbles, but that have limited contact with other folks. And it sure would be nice to get some new blood, some people checking things out for the first time that you get to talk to people about in Shanghai and New York and in Munich and all those other places. I'm sure. Wow.
Yeah.
Sure miss all that.
And you know what? I actually sat down for a drink last night, and I'd probably get fired after telling this story. I sat down and I said I needed to change it up. I literally had gone through weeks and weeks of red wine. I love my red wine, and obviously my Irish whiskey. But last night I went for a Jefferson's Reserve bourbon. And I mean, it blew my socks off. Just to have a different taste profile, a new challenge, not just a regular Irish whiskey, just a challenge, something new, something different. And it just goes to prove, we all want difference, we want challenge, we want diversity in our lives. I'm talking about sitting at a bar with somebody who never drank whiskey, and they're saying, how do you drink this stuff? Compared to, and that's what we want. We want to stand out. We want to say, seriously, guys, there's a reason I'm drinking this, and this is my reason. So yeah, look, people are essential to what we do in life.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said that better. Jeff?
Yeah, I just it's always neat how we go down these different paths and stuff, and like I love that you're bringing it back to people, and I think that's a big reason why you know uh, I can't speak for everybody, but it's almost assumed at this point. Like we all really got into these different beverages on different angles of just like being together and celebrating together. Um, so that just that makes me feel really good. It's interesting because you talked about making your trips to New York for St. Patrick's Day specifically, and I was thinking about the connection and kind of like the boom in the United States when it comes to Irish whiskey. There's definitely a spike surrounding St. Patrick's Day, and there's that celebratory aspect, and there's that getting together aspect, which definitely didn't happen this last year, and whether or not it's happening this year is another story as well. I was wondering if you could give us a little perspective, if you can. Are there things that you think Americans are doing right when it comes to St. Patrick's Day? And are there things that you think that we're doing way wrong?
Okay, Jeff. Well, I'm already fired because of the bourbon comment. So
you can do anything you want on your last day.
Yeah. So I'm free to comment. Honestly, the Americans do St. Patrick's Day much better than the Irish do. St. Patrick's Day has been lost on the Irish people. The Irish people based in Ireland, live in Ireland. We have lost a little bit of the appreciation of the view we have, the clean air, the beautiful green fields, the closeness to the coast for the majority of us. The easygoing lifestyle that we do live here. When you go to America, you really get an appreciation. The Irish in America have obviously educated the majority of the Americans very, very well, and that, it's something to be celebrated. And St. Patrick's Day, albeit I do know it is quite a drinking holiday, there is quite a lot of seriousness to it in the sense that the Irish people have added to a huge amount of communities, cultures, and countries around the world. And probably the biggest is America. But as much as the Irish have contributed to St. Patrick's Day in America, the Americans have really bought into it. And I think the reasons the Americans have bought into it is because I think it's everything the Americans want to be. I think the Americans want to be easygoing. They don't want to be complicated. They just want to sit at a bar, chat, have a drink, and be friendly with everybody. And that is what the Irish do extremely well. We are very, very simple people. We do things very, very well. We do it at a slower pace, but we're unbelievably passionate. And I do think, being the country that you guys are, you're massive, huge population, it can be complicated. And if it's complicated in the country, then the individuals and the natives can be complicated. But I think you guys do St. Patrick's Day unbelievably well. And I think if you were to do a census in Ireland and say, where do you want to spend your St. Patrick's Day? I swear to God, 98% of people are going to say New York or Chicago.
Or Boston.
Yeah. I had never thought of it that way, because, for us, sometimes when we think about Americans celebrating St. Patrick's Day, we think about there's some excess that can be had. But before that excess, man, you are right. Like St. Patrick's Day is like the happiest holiday I can think of that we have, because everybody's mood is so much lighter on that day. Like even from the time you get up and you're getting ready for your day, for school, for work, or whatever, it is a happier day in the life. So,
Cinco de
Hey,
Mayo
okay.
comes close.
See, serious note, then going into something a little bit silly. I was thinking about, why is it that Americans may have latched on to St. Patrick's Day when maybe it doesn't seem to be like taken in the same way in Ireland. I also think about, in America, Cinco de Mayo is a really big deal, which is a celebration of the Mexican army beating the French on this particular day. And what's interesting is it's so much more popular in the United States as opposed to in Mexico. I'm thinking about, different folks coming to the United States and really kind of being treated as others for a while, and then using these celebrations as a way of saying, like, no, look at how much we've brought to the table. And, really, making sure that we're not, we should never be dismissive of these things. Like, how awesome are these things? I did want to ask something in particular, because I don't know if this is a common thing in Ireland around St. Patrick's Day. In St. Patrick's Day, as a kid, if you do not wear the color green, are you going to get pinched?
You gotta lay off the drugs, man.
Oh, dude,
No.
that's like the thing. People get attacked and like pinched and like they get noogies if they don't wear green on St. Patrick's Day, especially in elementary schools in the United States. It's crazy.
Yeah, we would certainly have I guess you'd call it nearly like a badge of honor. And obviously, many years ago, the badge of honor was the shamrock. Unfortunately, shamrock and the clothes of shamrock are not as readily available as they used to be. So now the next step down or step up from shamrock would certainly be something green on the day. So yeah, I still think the majority of Irish people would get up on St. Patrick's Day and say, yeah, let's get a touch of green in there somewhere, whether it be underwear, socks, chief, something, once it's something green, we're good. But certainly not green Guinness, no thank you.
No, that can't happen. John or Jeff, any other questions before we move on?
No, I don't think it's.
No, I'm just, Tony, I'm so happy. You're just, I'm really having a fun time just listening to you talk about all this stuff. Just much appreciation. No more questions from me. I'm just stoked.
Cool.
Excellent. Tony, is there anything we may have missed or anything that you want to make sure our listeners know about before we move on?
No, I don't think so, Jeff. I think we've covered most of the points. As we know, it's an easy going conversation, so we're not going to get too deep on the whiskey.
Absolutely. All right. Well, if we've covered everything and nobody else has any other questions, it must be last call. Time to clean the house and lock the doors. You know what we do here, folks? We're looking for a little bit of help from you. John Ruyak, if the folks want to follow us on the social media platforms, where can they do so?
Well, We Like Drinking 1 is where you'll find us on Twitter. We Like Drinking is where you'll find us on Instagram. And the tavern, that's our social place. That's where everybody hangs out, particularly on Fridays and Saturdays. But throughout the week, there's updates, and that's welikedrinking.com/tavern.
Make sure you follow us there. If you missed it at the beginning of the show and you're looking and you've listened to Tony speak and you're like, I need to follow these folks, I need to find this whiskey, you can find Knappogue on Instagram and Facebook at Knappogue Whiskey. Again, I'm going to spell it because I know it sucks on listening to it, but it's KNAPPOGUE Whiskey. And on Twitter at Nap Whiskey, KNAPP Whiskey. Jeff Solomon, if the folks have some thoughts on our show, on Tony or Knappogue, where can they go to leave a review?
Hey, for those of you that whether you watch us live or on replay on YouTube, make sure that you give us a thumbs up, that you subscribe, and you ding that bell so you never miss an episode. Those of you listening in the audio version, take a look at your phone. You're probably listening on Apple Podcasts. Scroll down to where you see those empty 5 stars and fill them up, baby, just like you're filling up a glass full of some delicious single malt Knappogue whiskey.
That's right. And
let us know what you think in the comments.
We did get another 5-star review this week, Jeff Solomon. They didn't say anything.
Dude, if you're gonna leave a review but not say anything about it, quit listening to the show. We're giving you your stars back. Can we go back and do that? Can we take stars away?
I'll see if we can do that. Tony, did you have another thought? I thought I saw you raise your hand.
I had one question, which may not be, we can cut it out if you want. No, but we spoke about earlier. I had one question regards, you were speaking about craft beers.
Yes.
And I worked for a small company, a beer company called Heineken for many years. And the question I have is, Freddie Heineken was a craft brewer. Many, many years ago in the streets of Amsterdam. And my I love it, John.
Many years ago. Many years ago. Yeah. And you know what? You know, we all know the Miller story, et cetera, et cetera. So my question is, when do you lose the appreciation for a craft brew because it becomes an international brand? Where's the tipping point where you go, okay, I lose my craft appreciation for that brand because it's gone big now? What is the tipping point? Or is the idea never to become a huge international brand, or is it always just to stay craft?
I love that question so much, and I'm sure these other folks have a lot more to say about it. But I just want to give you my perspective as I don't know if you know this. I used to work at a record store. I'm like very hip. My ear is on the pulse of everything that's happening. So I'm the person to talk to about what's cool and what's not. And what I will say is this: I think that there are times where like a name and a term like really does a service, right? Like in the United States, especially, we would refer to breweries as being craft breweries, and I'm sure John has the exact number, if they made under a certain number of barrels of beer per year. And it was really, the idea was to identify, is this a smaller producer or not? And craft was the term that they used to label it. And I think that there are kind of some issues just with that name in general, because I think we've all kind of talked about how, like, look, the folks that work at Budweiser, the folks that work at Coors, the folks that work at Heineken, they can definitely make any sort of quality beer that they want to. And yet what we also see with a lot of the bigger breweries in the United States is that, there's a certain formula that sells really well, right? Like even though we're, these connoisseurs on this show, the general American palate is geared towards, these lighter, consistent, mass produced, lager style of beers. I think that there does need to be a change. And in the United States, we've seen like a lot of smaller breweries have taken on this label of independent brewers, where you see like this very specific like trademark that shows up on the label to signify that, yes, they're a smaller brewery. But man, there are plenty of gigantic breweries that make delicious beer. When you say Heineken, the first thing I think about is that Heineken owns Lagunitas, which is one of my favorite, originally, classified as craft breweries growing up. And I don't think that since they've become part of a larger company that they've slacked off in any way. I think they're definitely still true to the craft, and that's kind of where I see things. I don't know. I think what turns folks off maybe more is like some of like the business practices of some of like the larger breweries in our area, and them kind of like obfuscating the market. But that's almost like a different story, I don't know. What do you guys think?
John, what do you think?
So this is, and we've talked about this before, but certain brands seem to have lost their edge. And this hits close to home, Tony, because we at Lizardtail, we're on the cusp of growing. It's been a very difficult time with COVID, and we were on the cusp of growing before this hit. But because of our financial position being very conservative and not stretching ourselves too thin before this all hit, we're in a fortunate position to grow and improve the standardization of our processes, getting the kind of control within the brewery that could take our beer to the next level. On the other hand, I have this conversation as the brewer. I have this conversation with the owner all the time. How big do you want to be? And for me, I like the fact, and these guys, you haven't, Tony, but Jeff have seen pictures of my brewery, and it's extraordinarily small. I brew 400 barrels of beer a year in a space that's 325 square feet.
Wow.
It is handmade. I stir the mash by hand. I don't push a button and rakes spin around to mix the water with the grains. I mix it by hand, and I sanitize all the metal fermentators by hand. I scrub out the bright tank with sanitizer and rinse it out and re-sanitize it again before I load it in. Everything is done by hand. And when you're talking about craft, I think you're talking about things that are handmade. And that's a point of pride for me, and I don't mind busting my rear end to do that. And Dan's like, don't you want to work less days a week? And I'm like, no, I want to make the best beer we possibly can make. I want us to be the brewery that brewers come to have their beer after they get off of work. And that's a big deal, because you don't want to get to the point where you start to fade into what everybody else is doing. And if you drink enough craft beer, and you drink enough craft beer around the towns where you live, or you drink enough craft single malt Irish whiskey in the place where you work or where you live, and you go to somewhere else and you drink some of the other stuff, and you realize that those guys are bigger, they taste bigger, they taste cleaner, they taste like it's always the same. Like the point you made, Tony, where a couple of summers ago it was unusually hot in Ireland, and it's going to be interesting to see the way that plays out. Well, those things in a brewery play out on a weekly basis. Temperature changes and all these things. And some of the charm is, as long as the brewer's always good, and sometimes the water that comes out of the tap from the city has got a different chemical profile than other times. And that's what we have to do. We're not on a well. And we filter our water. We take the chlorine out and everything. We get the best water into the brew that we can. But sometimes the chemical content of that water changes over time, whether it's river water, whether it's water from underneath the ground in Albuquerque or whatever, or whether they mix it. So the beer changes over time. And as long as it's always good and true to what it is in of itself, some batches are better than others. And I think people appreciate that. I know I do. I'm like, I've got a batch of oatmeal stout that's coming out that's just going to be killer, just killer. I can't wait until those kegs go on tap because I know how good it is. And all the other ones were fine, but man, this one's special. So that's to me is the essence of craft. High level of attainment, high level of proficiency in your craft, but those little levels of, man, that's kicking. That's the difference.
So you're talking about craftsmanship.
Yes. Yeah. Here's a perfect example. You could go anywhere. I go looking for rattlesnakes, the one in the beginning of our thing at the beginning of our video. I can go down to Socorro, 100 miles south of here. And I want a hamburger on my way home. I stop at McDonald's and they make them really fresh there because it's not a really busy McDonald's. So they make them fresh every time. And that's a kicking hamburger, but it tastes great, but it isn't anywhere as good as the ones I make at my house.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's such a fantastic question because, and I won't go on too long an answer, but we're on a show. We've spent the last almost 6 years together doing this show, and a very basic question of what is craft beer, you get 3 very different answers in what that means. And I think that's part of why it's so great. John comes from a very passionate place because he's building it with his hands. Jeff and I come from a different place, because, Jeff brought up the independent brewer label that you're seeing from the American Home Brewers Association. And I get why they're doing that, because when I think of, great beers, some of my top 10 beers are going to be mass produced beers, because I will gladly drink a Guinness any day of the week. And it's hard to say that that's a craft beer, as in crafted. It is a mass produced beer. But you know what? It's freaking delicious, and it's an icon, and it is what most brewers want to be able to do, no matter what level of brewing they are at.
Shit. If I could put out quality and a recipe like Guinness on every day of the week, I'd do it. But so I just think it's a phenomenal question. One that as John said, we talked about a lot on this show. And I think it comes down to it's just the passion that sits behind the product that you drink. You are a great example of it. And you and a lot of the ambassadors that we've had on the show, your passion for what you do is infectious. Like, I don't know how many of the shows I've got done with ambassadors, and you're no exception. Like, the show's going to get done, and we're going out to the store to find it.
Pogue and see if I can find some of it near me. So I think that's, for me, where the craft kind of thing comes from. It's just from the passion from the people that are doing it, and there's a sense that once you go from all about the product to all about the business, I think you can get a little bit lost there. But a great question. You should have a podcast. Yeah.
I'm available to hire.
Yeah, since you lost your job today. So moving on with the end of our show, this is the longest last call ever. We've had a lot of late last calls, but we've got an Irishman on the show, so why would we not expect last call to carry forth a little further into the wee hours? But we have reached the time of the show where I get to say, Okay, panel, let's take one last trip around this table and get some final thoughts before we shut off the lights. John Ruyak.
You know what? Everybody is complaining about plastic bags, single-use plastic bags, all that stuff, and recycling and all these things. Screw it. I think we should go back to freaking paper bags at the grocery store, and here's why. And every single one of you listening to this show has had the same thing happen. You put your bags in the back of your car, and then you get home and you pull into the driveway and the bags have shifted. You open up the door and out comes your favorite jar of salsa and it breaks on your driveway. Guess what would keep that from happening in every single case? A paper bag. I want paper bags. Paper bags don't move around in the back seat. All your stuff stays in one spot. And a nice little triangle in the bottom of the paper bag. You don't have to worry about it. You do have to carry it from the bottom so it doesn't rip on the way in the door, because that's happened too. But paper bags, much better.
Tony, as you can see, this part of the show is whatever you want to talk about. So, Jeff Solomon.
You know, the thing that I was going to say, there are some surprising things that have happened during the recording of this podcast. I looked down at my phone and I saw that during the recording of this podcast, Dalvin Cook of the Minnesota Vikings has scored 4 touchdowns today. That was surprising enough. However, the most surprising thing is this. John Ruyak just admitted that he buys salsa in a glass jar. Shame on you. That Pace McClunkey bullshit. Save that for San Antonio, bro.
Dude, if you've tasted this salsa, you change your mind.
Craft salsa is where it's at, John Ruyak.
It's got to come in a plastic tub with the expiration date written in marker.
Tony Carroll, any final thoughts before we let you and the Pogue get out of here?
I got to get back to my family, unfortunately. But I must say, this has been one of the finest podcasts I've been lucky enough to be on. Absolute pleasure, Jeff by 2, and John to be part of this podcast. I love the free-flowing conversation, not just whiskey content, but beer, wine, and general politic. Absolutely, really enjoyable. But for me, always very important to remember, we all have our own opinions. The guys, the girls out there are all fabulous whiskey drinkers, beer drinkers, and wine drinkers. Everybody's opinion is important. Be safe, be unbelievably happy, and be always willing to take absolutely everybody's opinion. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. And Tony, let me just say, it was such a pleasure to have you on. Our Sunday shows are always, we never know what's going to happen, but this has been one of my favorite ones, and I really appreciate you taking the time out to join us. And as you said, we went all over the place on this episode, and I think that's what makes it great. And I just, one day, dare I say, it would be lovely to share a glass of Knappogue with you in Ireland, and we'll do another show there.
More than welcome. Anytime, guys. In the house. You're welcome.
Awesome. And with that, I'll say thanks again for joining us at the We Like Drinking podcast.
Where you'll never drink alone.
You forgot about it for a second.
Yeah, I did.
All right, give me 1 second.
Hi.
Oh, go ahead.
Hi, Sasha.
Hi. Hey,
Tony,
by the way, cheers. Thank you so much. This has been so awesome, dude.
Sasha, give me 1 second. YouTube, I'm going to end the broadcast right now so we can talk the business a little bit. Brad, it was awesome that you joined. Thank you, brother. I really appreciate it.
Brad, thank you.
No show this Tuesday, Brad. Got to wait.
Yeah, take a nap, sleep through the election result.
No, we need the hits. WeLikeDrinking.com/show.
All right.
Just go there.
All right. Talk to y'all later.